Hey nerds, and welcome to Theories and Conspiracies. I'm Brian from Good Nerd, Bad Nerd, and this is kind of a catch-up because I'm a few episodes behind, but I wanted to just cover a few things. I'm going to keep this as quick as possible since there are 4 episodes I'm going over, 2 for Flash and 2 for Supergirl. So I just thought it was important to do this before I gave you the next episode, which is on Crisis on Earth X. So, starting with Supergirl, episode 6, this was the flashback episode where we saw them as kids. Really nothing too important here. The 2 things I did want to mention were John appearing as the FBI agent who's kind of keeping watch over Kara. I thought this was a nice thing to show because it showed that John really was keeping an eye on them like he promised. So that was great. And the other thing was just kind of a weird Easter egg that they included Chloe from Smallville here. And Chloe, for people who are familiar with the show, she was one of Clark's best friends. She was kind of the tech person, and the reason they included her here was it was just kind of a nice wink and nod to the fans, but also it gave them a tech person they could use without having to have someone there to explain who Kara was or powers or anything like that, because Chloe would already know. So that being said, Chloe's not going to appear in the show at any point. I firmly believe we will not be seeing her. She did appear in the comics after Smallville, but not in a huge way. So I don't think we're going to be seeing her outside of just this kind of reference. You know, maybe a name drop every now and then, but that's about it. Now, the next episode, this is where we got some really big things moving forward. One, we got a lot of confirmation about who Rain is and what's going on there, but we also got confirmation about another direction the show's going, and that's with the Legion of Superheroes. So first, Rain. Basically, she is, as we've already learned, a genetic experiment, a child who was genetically experimented on and created from the Kryptonian Science Council to be a world ender. We did realize or learn this week that the ship that we thought was hers is not, which makes sense because it felt too big, and it is too big. Her ship is a Kryptonian pod very much like the one Mon-El was in, but also like the one that Kara came to Earth in. And so her mother showed her that, or her adoptive mother. And from there she got the command crystal, which took her to her self-generating Fortress of Solitude. And from there we're going to get her actually as Rain, and we see this alter ego, this kind of hidden persona take over, which is good because then we can still have Samantha after this is all done, and that her and her daughter can try and have a normal life once this is all said and done, and maybe Kara actually will have an ally after this. We will see how they play that out, but I don't see them destroying this family for the sake of a villain. Moving on. The Legion. We're going to learn a lot about the Legion. This week we only got a brief introduction. They're from the future. Mon-El got sent to the future. Somehow time works a little differently when you go through wormholes, so it's possible as a wormhole to the future, which is pretty much what he guesses. We don't know why they were traveling in time, if it was on purpose or on accident. I'm assuming it's on accident, but they were in these stasis pods and somehow crashed 12,000 years in the past. We'll probably find out more about that in the future. If they did have time traveling ability, you have to wonder, why didn't Mon-El just come back? But maybe it has something to do with it would disrupt the flow of time. Maybe he sees what Kara's life was and decided she'd be better off without him. Maybe her life is good without him. It's hard to say, but that's probably more we'll get answers on. The little we do learn about the Legion this week is really we just learn of Imra, and that's Saturn Girl, and she's one of the 3 founders of the Legion of Superheroes. The other 2 founders are Cosmic Boy and Lightning Lad. Now, there was a Legion of Superheroes cartoon for a while. It was pretty good. So you can learn a lot about these characters and get an idea for who they are. go check that out. One of the things that is very iconic to the Legion is they had flight rings. These were little bits of technology in a ring that all Legionnaires were given one, and it gave them the ability to fly. So will we see that? That would be pretty cool. This would allow Mon-El to be able to fly, but we don't know. So Imra, the little bit about her I'm going to talk about this week, because I'm sure we're going to get into the Legion in a lot more detail moving forward in future episodes. But Imra, she is a telepath, and she has mind control, things like that. So those are her skills, those are her abilities. And we're going to find out more about her and how her and Mon-El ended up getting married, because that's not in the comics either. But really, I think that was put in there to force Kara to move forward. Although they keep, every time they get her moving forward, they do stuff to just kind of mess her up emotionally again. So we will see. But all in all, it was a great episode, and really, really excited to see where this goes, how it moves forward. Moving into Flash, the first episode, talking about episode 6, this had some great moments. Again, it was a character of the week building up to who all this army of meta-humans that the Thinker created. We had the Black Bison, and she is a character from the comics, although she's actually a guy named John Ravenhair, and he is a Native American, and his birth name was Black Cloud in Morning, and he was raised in Queens, New York. Now, when his great-grandfather, whose name was Bison Black as Midnight Sky, when he was killed by a mugger, John was essentially possessed by spirits of his ancestors and became the Black Bison. And he basically had the abilities you see on the show. He can kind of imbue things to move like he did. But for the most part, he was a bad guy until he was separated from the spirits, and he still had those abilities, and he was an often good guy and ally. But for the most part, he went back and forth and was often a threat to Firestorm. So that's a nice. It's a good villain to bring in because of the ties to Firestorm and everything else. So the last thing for this episode that is just worth talking about is the Council of Wells. Excuse me. The Council of Wells was great. I could watch Harry talking to different versions of himself all day. It felt a lot like Rick and Morty's Council of Ricks, especially when Harry is basically, as he's talking to these guys, he's like, oh, these guys are brilliant, but they're all idiots. And it's felt a lot like Rick saying he's the Rickest Rick. And so that's I have to believe this was an intentional kind of allusion to that, but it was probably one of the best parts of the moment. So that was a great episode. Now, the next episode, episode 7, this was like Supergirl had a flashback episode. This was essentially a flashback episode as well, and we learn almost everything we need to know about DeVoe. We learn who he is, how he got his powers, why he got his powers, what he was doing, like what... We just learned so much about him, but the one thing we didn't learn is what his plan is. Like, why is he challenging Barry? What does he hope to do against Barry? Because that's, I think, such a crucial thing. And this would have been a great episode to explain. The only thing I can kind of guess is that they figured out a way to transfer his consciousness and his abilities into Barry's body, and they needed a speedster because of how his powers essentially are killing the body. They needed the speedster's abilities to kind of counteract it. That's the only thing that I can think of, and we'll figure that out moving forward. But there was just such a lot of great stuff here. It was nice to see just really how smart they are even before this, how the mechanics